Joining me right now on the broadcast is Mr. M.A. Sumanthiran. He is the Member of Parliament from Sri Lanka. Mr. Sumanthiran, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Sumanthiran, what's going on? It is perhaps the worst situation in terms of economics that Sri Lanka has seen in many, many years. Anger has been simmering. We are seeing protests now. Is it coming to a boil?
Yes, it seems like it's coming to a boil. This is the worst ever economic downturn the country has seen. The country has never been in this situation ever before. And the anger of the people is directed against the government, which knew for at least 2 years that we will have to face this situation, but did nothing and was living in denial and repeatedly denied that this was coming to a head. Even 2 months ago, the government said things are under control and that we can face whatever challenges economically that the country might face. So this anger is because of that primarily, but sparked off or triggered off by the fact that people aren't able to access essentials. Food, medicine are in short supply, but fuel is the biggest problem, even cooking gas, and people are standing in queues to get that. Ships carrying essential fuel are docked outside the harbor, not coming in because the government is unable to pay for the fuel. So foreign exchange crisis has really sort of daunted the government. They're not able to handle this crisis. They should have negotiated with the creditors more than a year ago and sought to reschedule the country's debt, but they kept repaying bonds and various other instruments that matured, and the repayment on sovereign debt that became due without any due regard for the fact that we will run short. We've dipped into our reserves, and the reserves are now almost zero.
Right now, what we've been hearing from the President of Sri Lanka is that they are renegotiating with the IMF. They're going back to the IMF. But the point is that many experts feel that the economic policies of this government have been all wrong. And there is also nepotism at play because the president, his two brothers, his nephew are in charge of the key ministries, which, are perhaps largely responsible for what we see in Sri Lanka right now.
Yeah, there are at least 7 members of the Rajapaksa immediate family who are in government. So it's a blatant nepotism. It's not something that's sort of coming to light now. And many more, about 10 times more, that number in key government positions. And so there is a serious suspicion as to why their intent on honoring the bond repayments. People have suspicion as to who the eventual bond holders are. So all of this has now come to a head when people have no food to eat and there are no way to travel, no way to cook even what they have. They've got to taken to the streets and they want the president to go.
Mr. Sumanthiran, how do you see the political situation now emerging? The anger is obviously there. We've also been seeing reports that seem to suggest that people on the street don't even, have enough fuel to cook. Cooking gas is a huge issue. Now, these are basics that everybody needs. So how do you see this essentially changing the political fortunes of the Rajapaksas?
No, their political fortunes are over. But the problem is that chasing them out is not going to give the answers. No one who is going to replace them will be able to suddenly make a turnaround for the country. So this has actually got out of hand totally. So the country is in absolute mess, is what I can see. Opposition political leaders are only now giving very weak voices against what the government has been doing or not doing. So some of the anger of the people is against the political opposition as well. But this is a situation where mass protests are happening spontaneously, even without opposition political parties giving any lead. And that's a worry that uncoordinated, unplanned, spontaneous protests, as much as one sees the bright side of it, if it is unchanneled,
yes,
that we might end up in an anarchical situation.
Absolutely. No, I was just coming to that because this is a recipe for anarchy, and Sri Lanka has just, about 10 years ago or so emerged out of a militancy that we saw for so many years. Give us a sense of what ordinary Sri Lankans fear at the moment. Obviously, they don't have enough to make ends meet, but they, as you're talking about the anarchy that we see on the streets.
You talked about the military issue. Even after the fighting ended, the country has traveled in that path. However much we raise this question about growing, military involvement in civilian affairs, etc. This government, there was a brief lapse of that in the 5 years between 2015 and 2020. But the Rajapaksa brothers have always relied on the military, and growing militarization has been one of the biggest issues. And so one can see that from the budget expenditure, very high defense budget. And even after the war ended, 12 years after the war, they seem to be increasing the number in the military and purchasing military hardware, etc. So that also has sparked off this downturn. The immediate trigger, of course, seems to be the taxation cuts that the president introduced soon after he came into office in November 2019. In December, all those relief, what was called relief, to the people were introduced, keeping an eye on the parliamentary elections that were to happen very soon thereafter. And now we have worked out that has had a massive impact on the sliding economy, and it is because of those tax cuts that the country that started going down the slippery slope wasn't being able to be held back. So that impact, along with heavy military spending, did not contribute in any way to come out of the indebtedness that the country was anyway in.
So essentially, Mr. Samantiran, what you're saying is it was a recipe for disaster that was brewing for quite a few years now. Thank you very much for taking out your time and speaking to Republic.
Thank you.